Welcome to the Score Speaker Series. I'm so pumped that I have my friend and filmmaker Derek Doneen here. What's up, Derek?
Jordan.
Thanks for joining us,
Good to
man.
see you, man. Thanks for having me.
No, this is awesome.
Appreciate it.
I'm really pumped to have you. Um, you just had a debut of Dancing for the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult, which debuted at #1 on Netflix in over 10 countries after the first 24 hours, and then remained the #1 show in the US for 2 weeks straight. So I just want to say congratulations on having a verified, certified Netflix hit. How does it feel?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a lot of mixed emotions because, I don't want to give too much away, but for the success of the show, it's great. For me, it's great. I'm so pleased that it's found an audience and that it's starting, some of the larger conversations that I hoped it might. All of that is so good. And the families are, and the victims, like all the subjects who participated, they're all really happy that they did. Nobody has any regrets. They're all continuing to sort of push the messaging in the show. And so that is all really great and warms my heart. But, this is a active story that is still unfolding, right? And I think that's part of why audiences latched onto it, is that they can sort of feel like they're in the middle of it. They can follow the story as it continues to unfold in the wake of the show's release. But some of the dancers are still in. Some of the families are still fighting to reunite with their kids, and in many cases still haven't talked to them since the show's come out, or have had very little communication. And I'm continuing to check in with everybody on an almost daily basis. And they're struggling, so it tempers the excitement a little bit when you're dealing with real humans' lives and struggles.
Well, what impact did you hope that the series would have on sort of viewers and society?
I think, like I said, just sort of starting some of the larger conversations around coercive control, cult-like groups. And really, for me, I think there are a lot of other, there are a lot. I was aware going into this that the wave of cult documentaries has crested or is continuing to crest, right? Like there are a lot of them out there, and I didn't want to make another one that was focused on the cult leader. I feel like we've all seen that. It is a criticism of the show that I want to know more about Robert. I want to know more about the psychology of the cult leader and how he does what he does and where he came from. And that just wasn't the show I was that interested in making. I wanted to give the audience enough about that and him to understand the present day story, understand the struggle of the victims. I include families when I say victims in that. I think they are victims. But I really wanted to center the story around them and their experience. What does it feel like to get out and have to rebuild your life from square one as an adult? What does it feel like to have lost somebody that you love into this and to have to fight for them and to put your entire life on pause, over a long period of time to fight for them and their safety? That was the story that I was interested in telling. And, I'm really pleased to see some of those conversations emerging, victim-centric conversations. What does that experience look and feel like? How do we process trauma? Realizing again that processing time can take months, years even. And I think often in cult documentaries, that step is overlooked, and it's much more sensationalized. It's much more about the bad things that the bad man did. And I was trying to approach it from a different perspective.
And you had mentioned before we jumped on here that this was like a 2-year process, right?
Yeah, started almost exactly 2 years ago, back in 2022, probably May of 2022.
And when was the last day of shooting?
We were shooting all through the edit. So, you see, we go all the way through Christmas. So it was probably, the end of 23 was, we were like almost done editing the show at that point. We were still shooting bits to cut into the third episode. So, production and post were happening simultaneously, basically throughout all of our production.
And the press has been amazing. Not just for you, but for everybody sort of involved that I think wants to be. Have there been any major updates since you wrapped the show?
Not really. I mean, Miranda has made some public statements, sort of rebuking the show and saying, she's an adult, she's making her own decisions. But she's not really responding to any of the allegations directly. I think there's still a lot of speculation about whether she's actually watched the show. It's sort of unclear with the things
Mm,
that she says and how much of what she's saying might be coming from Robert versus, her own opinion. Certainly, some of the negative comments that have been directed at her. Um, I mean, I'm like, this breaks my heart if that is happening. But what I can say with, you know, a relative degree of confidence that he's using that, to sort of pull her in more and maintain his grip over her and the control that he has, and so and sort of say, look, it's us versus them. It's us against the world, and this is why you have to trust me. Look at what your family's doing to you. I think he is using those things against her. But you asked what I hope would happen from this. I mean, I hope that she watches. If she hasn't yet, I hope she does. I hope she is able to have a more thoughtful conversation with her family, and hopefully at the end of the road that this actually might help get her and Nick and the others out. They're such talented, beautiful people that deserve all the success and all of the things that the others who've gotten out have achieved since then. But she just has to sort of wake up on her own time, and that hasn't happened yet.
absolutely. Working on a documentary like this just requires such a special level of attention, just given how sensitive the material is, and also, like you mentioned, just like what the people are actually going through. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, with any project, it's a similar process, but this one especially because, as we've talked about, it was happening in real time. It wasn't a sort of retrospective look back. It was trauma that people were actively experiencing and processing. I think that requires a lot more delicate care and attention. So I won't feel comfortable putting somebody on camera or asking somebody to participate if they aren't really ready for what that means and aren't ready for the world to then be brought into their most personal thoughts, feelings, experiences. So what that looks like on the ground is a lot of time spent with the subjects before we show up with cameras, a lot of conversations, a lot of in-person time, really making sure that when we do show up and we're ready to shoot, that this is a decision they're comfortable in, and that the situation is comfortable, and that continues through production. So what that generally means is that for this one, I was shooting a lot of it myself. Often it was just me in the room. Sometimes we'd have a sound person there, and they'd mic the subject, and then they'd go mix somewhere else. So it'd be me, Jess, the producer, and a sound person, and I would just be the only one in the room like all day. And sometimes I was miking them. There were some shoots, plenty of shoots where it was literally just me running sound straight into the camera. And again, that was to just create an ecosystem where it doesn't feel like a big production. It's very personal. It's very intimate. I can be right in the center of a conversation, and soon enough, they just kind of forget that I'm there, and they're able to sort of continue as they normally would. And that was, again, all for sort of just creating an environment that made them feel safe.
That's amazing. Thank you. I think one of the things that
Yeah.
is so amazing about this is the success of the show, and where do you go from here? Like, and I think this is such a good question for you on behalf of our audience, which is a lot of composers or music supervisors. When you're part of a hit show, what do you do to parlay that into the next thing? And so you're at real time doing that right now. So I just would love any perspective that you've learned in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, think I'm still trying to figure it out, like we all are. The market is changing by the day. It's not been great in our industry for a long time, as tech companies have taken over and have to answer to shareholders, and there's a lot of there have been the strikes and various forces that have really made it hard to sell projects right now. But I think the simple answer is you have to stay true to yourself. I've had a couple things come through I think because of the success of the show that just don't feel like me. And so I have to just stay true to myself and the things that I want to make, and be selective and trust in what's gotten me here, that will continue as I sort of make decisions about the stories I want to tell and the people I want to center, in those stories. Um, but in a larger sense, yeah, I mean, I think that hustle, never ends. That's the industry that we all chose. And, so still kind of trying to find a way to make it more sustainable and to make it a little more comfortable. But I love what I do. I love the access to worlds and to people that I might not have ever gotten exposure to or access to if it wasn't for this job. And again, like I have more interest in telling stories about people I love than people I don't. And so I just, again, have to stay true to that sort of North Star, and trust that it'll continue working out.
Yeah, and you're a man of many talents because you also do a lot of the editing yourself, right? And so can you just walk us through, I know a little bit personally, but like how you even started your career to end up directing, documentaries, and some of which that have done extremely well, including this one.
Thanks. I started working for a company called Participant, where we actually worked together a little bit way back when,
Yes.
my
Elk
first
game.
job. So grateful
Yeah.
that we can continue this, almost 20 years later. It's pretty special. 15 years later, it's pretty cool.
Amazing.
But I think in documentary you kind of have to wear a lot of hats. Often, when you find a story, there's no money until you've proven to somebody that you have the story and that the subjects are going to translate on screen. And so that means investing a lot of time, earning trust, shooting with them, cutting something together, and you're not getting paid for that. So you kind of have to do it all yourself, and it's really rare to find directors sort of at 20, 21, 22 coming out of film school or not that can start their career as a director. I was not one of those people, right? It took me time, but I was fortunate enough to put myself in a position to direct and to make stuff and to wear a lot of hats. And that's just sort of how I've always been, is just, I want to work, I want to collaborate. I want to work with many talented people. That's what brings out the best in me. But I always just know at the end of the day, I can rely on myself. I can pick up a camera, I can shoot, I can cut, I can do what I need to do. And so that's really what helped. At Participant, I was doing all of those things. And when I was ready to sort of go out into the world, it was because I could get in where I fit in. And I started working with a director named Davis Guggenheim, who became my mentor. And I was producing with him, I was cutting with him, shooting stuff, sort of field directing stuff. And again, because I could sort of do various things, we had a really sort of fruitful partnership that lasted many years. And he remains a close friend. And so it helps on a show like this, like I said, where I didn't want to have a big crew. And I could just, I ended up DPing it, which was super fun. I could just be the guy with the camera
Yeah.
in my hand and really think through what I want it to look and feel like. And in the edit, if we're marching towards a deadline and I need to get my hands on the keys, or I want to do a finishing pass on something, like I have the ability to do that. And then between jobs, if I'm still selling another show and or a movie and I haven't gotten money for it yet, I can find work as an editor or a producer. So it's helped in my career for sure. But everybody has a different path. And again, I think in doc you end up sort of by necessity needing to wear a lot of hats. And I think it makes your work better as a director if you can, because you're thinking about how a scene is going to be cut together. You trust yourself more when you're shooting to say, I know that I'm going to get the coverage I need, but right now the camera's going to stay here, even if the person's talking over there. The more interesting thing is happening right in front of me, and I'm going to keep my camera pointed there. So just sort of having that confidence to know that you're going to be able to figure it out in the edit really helps. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that you can do that. I mean, because I do feel like there's some editors that just edit forever. Even, the fact that you can just go make things, start to finish and do that on your own is super impressive. And it's obviously proven valuable. What's your proudest achievement to date?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. What's your proudest achievement to date? Is my internet
Proudest
bad?
achievement. Oh, wow. Yeah, you're breaking up there. I think you asked what my proudest achievement is.
Yeah.
I don't, I think it all comes down again to like to the people. And so it's not I mean, I've had success. I mean, winning Sundance was like a dream, obviously, for any young filmmaker. But it's about the relationships I've built. Like one of the prouder moments for me, I think, is I was editing the Kobe Bryant documentary. It's called Kobe Bryant's Muse. It came out in 2014 on Showtime. And, there was a scene in that movie that to me was like his origin story. It's like the scene in Italy. It's like a chapter of the movie in Italy growing up with his dad. And, and he just wanted so badly to like be next to his dad and part of his dad's life as a pro basketball player. And his dad really just like pushed him away, and so he would go off and just play by himself in the parks. And but to me, like that was like the birth of the Mamba, right? Like if you're a Kobe guy, the lore of the
Yeah.
Black Mamba. That to me was like the birth of that, right? A guy, who's sort of always been trying to fit in and always been pushed aside and always sort of been isolated from the larger group. First in Italy, then coming as a young Black Italian kid to sort of white suburban Philadelphia, to being the 18-year-old on a team of grown men, one of the first high school kids to join the NBA. So he's always been an outsider. He's always sort of walked this path of isolation, and it started there. Kobe didn't want it in the movie because he thought that it would just be salacious sort of tabloid fodder, me versus my dad. And that was not something he wanted to open up. And I fought him on it. I went into his office as, whatever, I was 25, 26, my idol, growing up in LA, Laker fan, like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, Kobe, like, this is your origin story. Like, we can't cut it out. Like, I don't care what anybody else says. Like, this has to go in. And he was like, okay, like, I hear you and you're really passionate and I respect that. But like, not the way you've cut it. I'll give you an hour, go back, recut the scene, and I'll take a look. I'll try. I've already made up my mind, but like, I'll try and stay open. So I'm like, all right, that's all I need. And I go and like recut the scene. And he comes with Rob Pelinka, now the GM of the Lakers. At the time was his agent. They watched the scene together, and he just like hits me on the shoulder. And he's like, "You motherfucker!" Like he's like, "That's going in."
Yeah.
He's like, I was all ready to say no, and that's going in. So like moments
That's
like that
amazing.
where you don't necessarily see that, but it's a thing that that I can carry with me that I'm really proud of.
That's
That I fought for
incredible.
somebody like that who I really look up to, and he was smart enough to sort of see it from my perspective and agree and yeah, so that stuff like that I really appreciate.
Well, it's funny because one of the questions I was going to ask you is if you could collaborate with one person, dead or living, who would it be? But you already have worked with Kobe, which I assume would have been on your list if you were like a diehard
I
Laker
know,
fan.
right? I've already
But
set the bar high. That's there's so many people. It's such a hard question to answer. I think, I mean, it would be so fun to learn from a guy like Kubrick. If he's a dead or alive, I mean, someone who's a uniquely singular
yeah,
voice, that I respect and that does things, that marches to the beat of their own drum. And, a filmmaker like that would just be so fun to learn from. But I'm lucky. I've gotten to work with a lot of my heroes, and
for sure.
hopefully we'll continue to. So
You will. What do you look for in your go-to sort of, because you have to assemble your whole team. So like what do you look for in your go-to partners, vendors, people that you're surrounding yourself with on a given project? Like how do you make that decision? Is it gut, or is it how do you navigate the trust within?
when you build trust with collaborators and tend to work with them over and over, but there's on every project there are people that you've never worked with before, that it's a leap of faith, right? Because you're looking at a resume, or you're looking at past work, and that tells you something, but not everything. I think for me, it's so much about like the way that your brain works, how you think, how do we communicate, and do we approach the material from a similar perspective. Those are the things that I look for, and people who have the same ethos of not wanting the product to leave their hands until they're happy with it. That's like, to me, the big, like, those are the two biggest things. I don't want to have to ask you to work nights and weekends or to work late. I hope that we never, and I'm proud that on this last one, we didn't have a lot of that. We had pretty normal
Yeah,
working hours, but if it, and invariably you get down to it, and you're going to have long nights sometimes. And I just want people who are going to ride with me and who, again, have that same sort of high level of for themselves and for the project, that it's done when we say it's done and when it's good enough, and we're going to do what it takes to get there. And again, like, someone that I can just have more philosophical conversations with about the project, and the subtext and the nuance, like, what are we trying to say, and how are we going to get there, and how can we do it in a way that's felt, not necessarily said, or isn't so on the nose. And if I can if I can have that kind of conversation with you from the jump, then I know that we're going to work well together. And so that stuff to me is much more important. Those intangibles are much more important than the past work you've done.
for sure. We've been lucky enough to collaborate on a lot of projects, but some of the people tuning in were curious just about your process as a filmmaker in thinking about music. And so walk us through the process of, when does a song come to mind for you in the process, as well as, like, how do you select a composer to score a project?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, composers are actually, like, that's the one area where I feel like almost every project I've worked with somebody new. And I think it's because I'm really just trying to find somebody for each project with a sound that feels right. It's hard. Hard to pinpoint what that means. When I'm in an edit, I always say that I let the project tell me what it wants to be. I let the story dictate what it wants to be, and I don't try and force things as often as possible. You start to just listen to what the material is telling you, and I feel that way with music too. There's a certain vibe or tone. There's storytelling in the music, and so I look for composers that that are storytellers, that can, again, talk on an emotional level. I played drums growing up, but I'm not a musician really, so I'm not going to be able to speak about and like the intricacies of instrumentation, right? Like, maybe if you did this or that, like, I'm a much more like emotional um conversationalist when it comes to music. So I'm like, this is what I think this cue should be doing. This is how it should make me feel. I can say I want it to be bigger, I want it to fill the room, I want it to punch me in the gut, or maybe bassier or whatever, things like that. But like, when it comes to like technically how to achieve that, I will leave that to the composer. But I like people that take risks. I like people that work not just in doc but in scripted, and have that sort of mind too. And then it's about finding the right balance with needle drops, right? Like, finding songs where the lyrics sometimes do some of the storytelling for you, or can affect the way you're viewing a scene or thinking about a scene, that can get you emotionally to a place that the composed music might not, because it's a sort of an injection of energy or a different sound. Again, that might help us speed up the pace, or might help us slow it down, or might have an emotional resonance to it, that's different and needed for that moment. So yeah, I'm really proud of how the music turned out on Dancing. And we have some great needle drops that you guys helped us clear, that that we fought really hard for, that I'm really proud of.
So agree.
Francis and the Lights had a big, left a big mark on it. Big fan. Madison
Yeah.
Davenport wrote 2 songs for it that are incredible. So yeah, really proud of how the music turned out in this one.
Do you edit the series to temp score before you found before you find a composer, or do you actually prefer a composer just to score to picture?
Well, both. I want the composer to score to picture, but you have to cut with something, So in this case, Ariel Marks, who is our composer, she's incredible. She has a pretty big library. So I was telling the editors, try and cut with her music as much as you can. Obviously, she's going to find a
Yeah.
new sound for us for this one, but we can start to like get in the right ballpark with some of the instrumentation and the way she approaches writing. So we'll try and temp with the composer's library, if it exists, if we and when and if we can. But yeah, they are writing to picture. Sometimes the temp is sometimes you have temp love and you fall in love and you want the composer to do something very similar, but often I'm saying, this works because the pacing is right, but the tone is way off and the instrumentation doesn't match. And, so just start from scratch here. And here's what works about it. Take what works, leave what doesn't, but yeah, so it's definitely a combination.
Yeah, I feel like you struck a really good balance, especially in the last show with needle drop and score, and just feeling like a cohesive sound, throughout the whole series.
I'll say that like I've been on projects where they don't bring a composer on until the show is locked, and that's frustrating for me. Because I think that
Yeah,
I'm such a like musically driven editor that I'm gonna let the music sometimes dictate certain cuts, and even if I'm asking them to write to picture, I might hear something in the music that inspires a different choice in the edit, or I might tweak by a few frames here and there to like really make it sing. And I think those two things really work together. So what I really don't like is locking picture and then just having just sort of like overlaying score on top and writing to picture that way. I mean that can work, but I would still want like a week then to go in and like tweak everything around it. And sometimes I don't get that opportunity. Like on shows I've edited before, like there have been, they've wanted to work that way, and that's more frustrating for me. So I definitely want the composer part of the process and to help the storytelling. And as an editor, I want time to work their music into the show for sure.
definitely. Well, I'll leave you with this last question, which is, where do you see the future of this industry going?
Wow. Doc in general. I think it's an interesting place we're in now because in many ways it is like a golden era for docs, and that people are consuming them at a higher rate than ever before. And you know, I think a lot more interesting stuff is being made. That said, I think the rise of sort of tech companies as the really we're like pitching to the same five buyers, kind of, with some exceptions, and they're all competing for the same audience. And in our country, it's a global audience, but in our country and around the world in general, we're philosophically pretty divided. And they're trying to capture all of those people. And so kind of what that means is that, you don't want to offend people over here. You don't want to offend people over here. And so you have to make stuff kind of in the middle for everybody. And that can be frustrating as a creator. I think there was a time when networks wanted to take more risks. They maybe had a brand that they could honor, and your project might not be right for this brand, but is right for this brand. And again, now I think many of them are all kind of fighting for the same audience, and they have to turn a profit for their shareholders year over year. So the way they approach stuff is changing, and we have to find a way as creators to realize that that's the ecosystem we're making stuff for, to live within that and to thrive within it, but still again stay true to ourselves and make stuff that we're proud of, that we want to be making, that honors the kind of storytelling that got us here, and that inspires us. And so that's kind of the balance, right? And it's an ever evolving sort of morphing, shifting industry. We're still, I think, trying to dig out of the last couple of years of turmoil and find a homeostasis. And, so, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what that means. I just sort of, again, I kind of have to just react to it and make the most of it and live within it. Because what other choice do you have? But like I said, the fact that there are so many more people hungry for doc content and wanting to consume it, and taking risks on stories that are happening in real time where you don't know what the ending is going to be, all that stuff is super encouraging to me. The fact that we even got this made, that people are engaging with it the way that they are. I can't tell you how many pitches I've been in where I have a story that is, again, evolving in real time, verite driven, where people say, well, we don't know the ending. It's too risky for us. We love it. We love the world. We love the subject. We love the story. But until it's sort of reached its conclusion, we don't want to make it. So to have a proof of concept now out there that's doing it as well as it is, where you don't have a traditional resolution, is exciting for me, that there's an audience for that. And so, yeah, short answer is I don't know exactly, but we're making it work anyway,
Well, I'm incredibly proud of you, Derek, and I just wish you so much continued success. You truly deserve it. You're so talented and you're just such a good guy. And we're grateful for all the collaborations. And I'm grateful today that you joined us for this interview. So thank you so much. And, keep up the great work.
Thanks, man. Likewise, it's been awesome watching your rise and watching what Score is doing now across the industry. I've been very grateful to call you a friend and to have gotten to work with you over the years. And let's keep it going, man. Thanks for
Let's do
having me.
it. All right, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Bye.
Much love, Jordan.